You're listening to the Every Student, Everyday podcast with me, Jim Franchini, Superintendent of the Averill Park Central School District. Welcome to this episode of the Every Student, Everyday podcast. As we do every year around this time, we thought we would devote an episode to the budget. This podcast is going to drop on May 4th, and our budget vote is scheduled for May 19th. So we thought we'd communicate some of the interesting things that are going on and talk through the development of the budget and that whole process. And we have joining us today on the podcast our two assistant superintendents, one representing the business side of the house and the other one representing the instructional side of the house. So I'll give them a chance to introduce themselves. Carrie, do you want to go first?
Sure. My name is Carrie Nyc-Chevrier. I'm the assistant superintendent for business, and I am finishing my 5th year here at Averill Park.
Great. Thank you. And Matt?
Hi, I'm Matt Hladun. I'm the assistant superintendent for teaching and learning, and I just finished my 7th year here at Averill Park.
Great. Thank you. Time going quickly. So let's get right into it with kind of a quick rundown of the 26-27 school budget, which is going to go out to vote, as I said, on May 19th. Carrie, can you kind of talk to us just a little bit about what's in this budget, some of the highs and some of the process and highlights and all that's kind of going on?
Sure. So some of the highlights of this year budget, the budget that we're going out with is about $73.2 million. It's a 5.42% increase from the previous year, which is a little bit larger than what we usually put out. So it's a $3.7 million increase, but 44% of that increase is due to increase in debt service that we have going on. The district is closing out the $28.5 million project, but starting with $39.9 million. So just the timing of that is driven up the budget numbers a little bit. Associated with that budget is a tax levy increase of 3.99%. The district this year is actually going out below the tax cap of 4.66, which is about a reduction of $247,000 from the cap. So we're going out lower than we are allowed under the tax cap regulation.
Let's kind of stick with some of the things that you just mentioned specifically in there. The debt service piece, just so our audience is clear, and I know we've talked about this through the budget presentations, the voters approved capital project in 2021, capital project 2024. And really at that point, they're, as we've said, you're kind of approving the expenditure of funds in the future. And this is where we actually go through the process of getting those funds. Is that a correct way of kind of looking at the debt service and the tax cap and how those are all playing together?
Yep. So the way we finance our capital projects are two different ways. When we start a capital project, like we are with the 2024 project, we start doing temporary financing. We call those BANs, bond anticipation notes. And that debt usually is a lower principal and interest cost because you're building that up incrementally as you go along with the project. With the $28.5 million project that was passed in 2021, we're moving away from that temporary financing of the ban and moving to a bond. And when you go to bond, that's where your higher principal and interest payments come on because now you're financing it over 15 years. So it's a set financing schedule. Whereas before you get to that point, you only borrow up to what you need, but we're pretty much wrapping up that project. So we're at the point in time where we're going to bond to them. And this impacts the tax cap because there's a part in the tax cap where there's a capital exclusion. And what the state allows you to do, well, your voters have approved the projects, you need to pay for your debt. So we're going to make an exclusion for those increases in the debt service payment so you can raise money to pay them without impacting your programming. So this year, our tax cap is a little bit higher because of those debt service payments that are coming on for both of the projects.
Thank you. I think it's a great explanation about how we put the capital projects out, but because of that debt you're taking on, it's going to impact the budgets down the line. That really is impacted through the tax cap being higher. And then, as you mentioned, the board has decided to go out at a lower number as a tax levy than the maximum would be. So we have that tax cap, which is referred to as the 2% cap in years past. It's really not a 2% cap. Can you talk a little bit about what the maximum would have been this year and where the board decided to go, and maybe the impact of that? I know we've talked with the community and the board about the money that's not generated and then how that has a compounding effect.
Yep. So this year, the allowable increase per the calculation would have been 4.66%, but the district, we've decided to go out 3.99%, which is lower than the cap. The difference between the two numbers in the tax levy is $247,000. So that's essentially money that we're not taxing the community for, and that would have gone to support different aspects of programming. What that will ultimately do this year, we're not raising that $247,000. But if you look over the span of 10 years, you kind of roll that out and multiply it out, because every year, the first year you don't raise it, then you don't have it that second year, you don't have it that third year. A lot of times business officials will say that that's the money you're leaving on the table because you're not asking your community for it when you could have. But it will compound out because that's, every year you've left that money on the table. So over 10 years, that $247,000 will turn into $2 million. So there is a real effect of going out below the cap.
And this is really, the tax cap era began in around 2012. And this is the only second time that the district has not gone out at the levy maximum. So the district has always gone out at the tax levy, never gone above it. Has always gone out at the maximum, except for the 2 years, this being the second year since 12-13, which was the first time that the tax cap law kind of came into effect. So it was a very conscious effort and a very tough decision by the Board of Education to go out under. But I think there was a real recognition by the board that, things are increasing in terms of costs for our community, the same costs that we're dealing with. And I'm going to ask you about that as a future question, but some of the same costs that we're dealing with, our community is dealing with, and we realize things are kind of uncertain right now at this time. So there was a real, I think, belief by the board that they did not want to go to the maximum and to protect the community from a higher increase when we felt like we could do a little bit of a lower one, even though there's going to be obviously an impact program with that, which is maybe a nice segue to Matt and the instructional side of the house. I know there's not a lot, but can you talk about what type of academic improvements are in this year's budget? Probably more of a keep what we have and maybe some additions around the edges. Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly it. We know, adding new programs is always a challenge, although it can be done. I mean, I'll go back a year ago. We had a business teacher on our wish list for quite some time, and we were able to bring a business program back in the high school, and it's been wildly successful. So I think we certainly look for those opportunities where we can, but with resources being somewhat limited, we have to choose wisely, I guess. So, specifically to what we can see for new next year, I think there's two areas that we focused on. One is really continuing to expand what we started last year, which was our co-teaching program. If the listeners remember, we added co-teaching to grades 2 through 5 at all three of our elementary schools. We have seen tremendous success in those programs. The benefit to all of our students in those rooms has been just awesome to watch. And so we want to keep that going. So the next logical place to do is to look as those kids move from 5th to 6th grade, how we can provide co-teaching opportunities at that level. So we'll be working between, now and the start of the next school year to expand co-teaching to 6th grade, specifically in the ELA and math areas. I've already had conversations with the teachers in those grades, and our special education department is working hard to ensure those teachers are prepared, have professional development, have opportunities to work together, and really kind of keep that continuity of services going from our elementary to our middle school. The other area that we are looking at, as some may know, we have a CTE program in our high school, which is essentially like having a BOCES program, but the students can do it right here at Averill Park. We have two areas that we provide CTE programs, one in automotive and the other is in construction. So one of the things that we're really interested in trying to do is build a bridge from the middle school to high school so that students that may be interested in those CTE programs don't have to wait. Typically, if you go to a BOCES, you wait till your junior year. We have programs starting in 9th grade that are lead-in programs to the CTE program at junior and senior year. But now we're actually going to push that down a little bit lower into 8th grade as an elective, and we're developing a CTE elective for 8th grade students in the middle school. It's essentially going to be like a project-based kind of course where students will get exposed to both automotive and construction. So they come into the high school with a little bit of a background knowing, yep, this is definitely something I want to get involved in. Then they can take those electives in 9th and 10th grade and then start the CTE program once they get to 11th grade. So really excited to see that starting to bridge the middle school, high school together. We know how popular CTE is here. It's one of our well-subscribed opportunities, both the auto and the construction program. So it makes sense to stretch that down into the middle school.
Great. That's a great overview. Thank you for that. I think you're right. We've tried to very strategically add where we can add or enhance where we can enhance while maintaining as much as we can. And we try to do that very much surgically with a scalpel, and in terms of really looking for those small opportunities that meet our budgetary constraints, but also add value to our students. We always do kind of talk with the administrative team about additions, which includes, we kind of break them down into their wants and their needs. What are some of the things that didn't make it through the budget process that our administrative folks would have liked to have some of the things they've talked about? I know some probably have been on the list for years, like you referred to the business program. Yeah. What's out there in terms of what we would add if we could?
Sure. So, I mean, I'll go back to the business program as a great example of something that was on the list for a while. It starts off as a want, and every year we talk about the wants and you see what can we afford to do. Obviously, it's been challenging the last few years, but as you just mentioned, we look for those opportunities. Really along those lines, there's been two other things that have been on that list for at least the last, I'll say, 4 or 5 years. The one is an additional body for our music department. I won't really specify where that body would go because it changes based on the need, but we know that our enrollment in our music program has continued to grow. We're seeing huge numbers coming out of the elementary school into the middle school. We're seeing growth at the high school, and it's been a challenge. You're talking really large ensembles. When you have large ensembles, you need to provide lessons for those students, and our lesson groups are really large. So we would benefit largely from having another presence somewhere in our music department. So that's something that has been on our wish list for the last few years. Another big one that we have yet to be able to accomplish is having a social worker for our K-5. That's not necessarily specific to one building. We don't have any social workers in our elementary schools. We do have counselors. We do have school psychologists. They take on a lot of that social work role, but having someone dedicated to that, which a lot of that is about family outreach and making connections between school and home. So having someone really specializing in that's paying close attention to it would be a benefit to us. Again, it's been on the list for a while, just really haven't gotten to the finish line with it. I can assure you that we'll probably be talking about it next year. Maybe one of those positions we'll be able to do in the budget, but if not, we'll definitely be talking about the fact that we want that.
Excellent. Thank you. Carrie, I don't want to leave you out of this. Matt's talking about the instructional side of the house, but you oversee not just the budget, but the non-instructional side. Anything that's in this budget that is really an addition or improvement, either small or big, from your side, and then also kind of the same follow-up question of what is out there that if we had more funds, you would see as a priority?
So one of the big things that we put in on the non-instructional side for this year is a new attendance and GPS system for our buses. This was a huge thing for us for a variety of reasons. The first is I think the community is probably aware at this point of our bus driver shortage, and we've made some strides in terms of doing some salary adjustments for bus drivers to try to recruit more. So we're doing a big push in terms of that. But what that has happened is we have a lot of substitutes driving our routes, and what they have been doing is using a piece of paper to try to learn where they're supposed to be going. The new system will have the routes preloaded and have a GPS, which will give them step-by-step directions, which is a safety issue because you don't want somebody trying to manage all the students on the bus and also trying to look at a piece of paper to try to figure out where they're going. So that'll be a huge improvement in terms of the safety of those routes. The other piece of that is there's also going to be a parent app where parents can track their bus, so they can see if their kid's bus may be running a little bit late. It gives us the opportunity to push messages out to specific bus runs a lot easier than we have the capabilities to do now. But we're hoping what that does, it'll free up calls to the bus garage when the dispatchers want to be concentrating on like what's coming over the radio from the drivers, instead of having to answer some calls from parents that might be like, hey, the bus is 5 minutes past late. We know some of those minor delays that we get when we're driving routes. So that'll be a huge improvement for our buses. The other thing that it does is it'll track student attendant on the bus. So as kids get on, the drivers can indicate which students got on at which stop. And this is in case we ever had some kind of incident, like an accident happens, we know who was on the bus, who to contact. So again, it's like more focusing on the safety part of the transportation. It gives us capabilities that we currently do right now in a more manual process, but this will make it broader in terms of how we track the attendance. If you wanted me to segue into what I would add to the budget, we've been advocating for years in our O&M department about getting extra custodial staff. We look at the square footage of the building, and our Algonquin Middle School is significantly understaffed in terms of square footage per custodial worker. So if we were to add a position on the non-instructional side, the custodian would be the first place that we'd go.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, I think for both the instructional and non-instructional side of the house, those are things that we know have been out there for a while. I will add that Carrie and myself and Kate Dorgan, our safety person here, we were able to take a bus ride using the new system. We have some demo software that we're able to test out. And the difference really is exponentially better. I mean, it's amazing what our drivers are doing now, especially as you said, our sub drivers. And this is just, it's bringing us up to the year 2026 with GPS and making our attendance more accurate, which is important, as you said, for safety points of view. So it's really a much needed improvement and enhancement. Carrie, I kind of touched upon this earlier a little bit. We have some major drivers of increases to our budget that are by and large out of our control. Can you talk to our listeners about what some of those things are?
Sure. One of the largest drivers is health insurance costs. For the past couple of years, our rates have been going up, and they continue to do so next year. We have two plans within the district. One plan is going up 16.5% in terms of the premiums, and the other one's going up 10.45%, or about 10.5%. So year over year, we're seeing these large increases in health insurance. So this year, across all of the health insurance that we offer, it's a $1.1 million increase to the budget, which is a significant increase, particularly when we look at it in terms of revenue. This year from the state, we're getting a $450,000 increase in foundation aid. So our foundation aid doesn't even cover not even half of what our health insurance increase is. So all the money that we're getting from the state in new money is already been eaten up by our health insurance costs. So health insurance is a definite driver. We also have our employees' retirement system. The percentages that we have to contribute to that system has gone up. It's going from 16.5% to 17.6%, which is about $293,000. And this is just money that we pay to support this pension system for our non-instructional staff. And then the last one, I think, is utilities. I think everybody can feel this even in their own home budgets. Our electricity costs over the past 3 years have increased 60%, and they're going to continue to increase next year. The budget impact for going into next year is about $190,000 for us. So these three things combined are at $1.5 million. So you can see how the money that we're getting from the state, the 450 doesn't even cover that. And then on top of that, we still have other increases, such as salaries and maybe some materials and supplies and equipment that continue to go up. So those are three of the larger budget pressures that we're facing.
Thank you. And that's a nice explanation for that. And I think, again, things that people can identify in some ways in their own homes with some of these costs. Matt, we've kind of talked about academic improvements that are part of the budget, and this is certainly connected to that, but is not really part of the budget because it's coming from a different funding stream. The governor in her proposal, and as of the recording of this podcast, the state budget has not been approved, but in her proposal, quite a bit of money was set aside for UPK. Can you talk to our listeners about, I guess, all parts of it? What are we doing right now with UPK? And then what the governor's proposal is and how we would implement that if it is part of the final budget deal.
Sure, I can kind of give a quick summary of how UPK has been operating here and where we want to go with it. We have been running a UPK program at Averill Park for the last, this is our 4th year, and we do it largely through what they call CBOs, community-based organizations. So we have organizations around our area that are hosting Averill Park classrooms in their facilities, because to do it ourselves would have a budgetary impact. So we've been unable to do it in our own schools because we didn't want to burden the taxpayer with those additional costs. The state does fund it currently, but not at a rate that allows us to do it without adding cost to our local taxpayers. So as a result, we've been running it at St. Jude's and Holy Spirit School. We previously have used Sacred Heart when they were operating. What the governor proposed back in January was the increase of that allocation for schools. What that means for us is that by adding that additional funding for per student, we're able to now do a program in-house without it burdening the taxpayer. We'll add no additional costs to our overall budget. So that's allowed us to start planning to do an in-house UPK program. And we can additionally still utilize our CBOs. So that's something that we're still going to continue to do. So as you mentioned, we're waiting for the budget to get approved. We had hoped by now it would be. But as of April 28th, that's still a waiting game. But we are still planning as if this is going to happen. And if it does, we'll be ready to go. And what that would mean is that we would be able to offer over 100 spots for our incoming 4-year-old population. So students that are 4-year-old and up that are not kindergarten eligible would be eligible to put in for a lottery that would allow us to provide over 100 spots for either a program in-house or in next year's case at St. Jude's. We'll only be using St. Jude's next year through a variety of reasons, but essentially we'll have 3 classrooms at St. Jude's and would have 3 classrooms in-house here at Averill Park. Really excited. We have seen really great outputs from students that have been part of our UPK program. We really believe that having an experience as a 4-year-old better prepares students for not only kindergarten, but really all of elementary school. That gets them a nice jump start on that. So really believe in the value of preschool, and really excited at the opportunity to do it here at Averill Park in our schools. So eagerly awaiting that budget approval. Once it happens, we will be moving quickly. We have already run our lottery. So parents who have applied for the lottery have a spot that will allow them to choose whether they want their students to come here or to St. Jude's. So once we get the okay from the state, we'll move quickly and start placing students and get our program up and running. Obviously, a lot to do. We never done this before, so we have to look at our ELA program, math program, our social skills program. There's furniture, there's facilities. There's a lot of things to work through. We've started some of that planning, but we didn't want to go too far without assurances that funding would come through the New York State budget.
Thank you. Thank you for your work on that. It's a lot of work. Become kind of a UPK expert in a short amount of time. So thank you for that. Carrie, I'll give you the last word here. I know you don't have a crystal ball, but if you were to kind of project based on what you're hearing at your level in your, business official meetings, what do you see as sort of the long-term outlook for school budgets? Is there anything out there in terms of concerns or hope, or where do you see this? I know a lot of people in our world talk about the way public education is funded as being unsustainable with all the pressures that are on it in terms of expenses, and it's just a tough situation. Is there anything out there in terms of what you're hearing in terms of the outlook of where public education budgets are headed?
Well, I don't want to end on a downer, but I think that the budgets are going to continue to be tough, and there's definitely some uncertainties regarding future budgets. The state went through a process of updating the foundation aid formula a little bit. They changed a couple of factors, which actually benefited our districts. We got off what they would call the hold harmless category, which is when districts per the state were getting more aid than they were due. And we got back on formula. So we've benefited for a little bit of a higher aid percentage increase than we would have gotten on the hold harmless. Couple of things within our district, we are, have slightly declining enrollment, and we got to watch that, because if that continues, we may end up back on hold harmless. Hold harmless, there's no guaranteed minimum increase there. Like one year when we were on hold harmless, it was a 0% increase. It's been, I think this year the governor projected 1%, the legislature's fighting for 2%. So they're very minimal increases in terms of what districts are getting from the state. And right now, I think the majority of the districts are on hold harmless. So there's not huge increases going to most of the districts across the state. So that's concerning because the only other real source of revenue that we have is the tax levy. We're capped and we have limitations in terms of raising money on that side as well. So we're like in this spot where we have true budget pressures in terms of like health insurance that's not just Averill Park, that's districts all across the state are having these huge increases in their health insurance, and we're having really minimal increases in aid we get from the state, and then what we can do in terms of raising local taxes. So it puts us in a bind in terms of looking at their budgets each year and trying to figure out what we can sustain and support going forward. So I do think things need to change a little bit at the state in order to correct how schools are funded, because the way it is right now, there's a lot of districts that are, particularly in this year, we're hearing a little bit more chatter about how health insurance is really crushing budgets. And we don't want to keep reducing program or reduce program just to support health insurance costs. So it's a tough position to be in. So it's going to be, I think, a little uncertain moving forward in terms of because of the revenue and some of the costs that we have that are increasing. But we will continue to work through the budgets to put forward the best that we can in terms of supporting the staff and the students within the district.
That's a great overview, Carrie, of the kind of outlook in the future. And as you said, maybe not to end on a downer, something we could make sure our listeners are aware of that's a little bit more on the positive end. We have, as always, a bus proposition that'll be voted on by the community. What we do have this year, it's a little bit different, is a capital project referendum. Not what people usually think of when they think of a capital project where we go through a process and ask for money from the taxpayers to do something in our facilities. This is a no-cost capital project referendum, but one that we need our community to officially approve. So I'll highlight the zero cost as we go into a positive. Can you talk to our listeners about what that capital project referendum is?
Sure. So as we're closing out the $28.5 million project, we have about $1 million in savings from that project base that we can spend in other ways. So as we're closing this project, the town of Post and Kill passed a new water district, and the timing is such that they're running the new water lines in front of the Algonquin Middle School this summer. We're doing construction at the middle school this summer. So what we'd like to do is take that $1 million in savings from the one project and have the voters give us the authorization to use those funds to connect to that water line. The reason we need the referendum is even though we have the money, we didn't explain to our voters that's how we'd be using the money that was already approved. So we just need to have them expand the scope and say, yes, you can use the $1 million in that way. So it's not authorization of more funds. It's just a different way to use the funds. So we want to tie into the water line because then we've been on municipal water and we have had some PFOA issues with Algonquin water in the past. It would just benefit everybody if we could get on the municipal water.
That's a great summary of it. It's a positive to get Algonquin on municipal water, and it's a positive that it costs no additional dollars. And it's actually coming from money that has been saved from a previous project. And that's all good stuff. So again, this podcast is going to drop on May 4th. On May 5th is our board meeting. Prior to that board meeting, we have our budget hearing. And then 2 weeks later, on May 19th, is the actual vote. The vote will be the budget vote. It'll be the bus proposition. It'll be the capital project referendum with no cost. And it'll be the Board of Education vote. Again, we have 2 spots there. And if you've seen our communications on that, there were no petitions turned in. So that'll be write-in candidates only. There'll be no one on the ballot. And the top 2 write-in candidates will be on the Board of Education. So thanks, Matt. Thanks, Carrie, for taking some time, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. See you next time on Every Student, Every Day.